After losing the 2010 World Championship final, Vasilin Topalov has struggled to find his form. But recently, he's been back and won the FIDE Grand Prix tournament in Zug in emphatic style just a couple of weeks ago. In round 3 of Norway Chess, he faced the world champion Viswanathan Anand. Let's see if he could lay a few ghosts to rest. Anand had the white pieces and it was a Sicilian defence. And Topalov played his favourite Najdorf variation. Of course, Anand also plays this regularly as well, and well, a very dynamic opening. Anand played his favourite English attack with bishop e3. And you can see that in this position, after f3, white's intention is to storm forward with the g-pawn. And black castles on the king side, and white castles on the queen side. So we're guaranteed a sharp struggle with both sides on both kings on opposite sides of the board. Now here, this is almost the starting point of this entire variation. Here in this recent tournament in Zug, Topalov won a really nice game by playing a5 against Caruana. This is my favourite move here. It's actually my recommendation in my Najdorf DVD. I like this because you try to embroil white in play on the queen side before he has a chance to attack on the king side. No doubt Anand would have had something prepared there. So Topalov deviated. He played instead the old main line knight b d7. Anand played g4 and now b5. And here the old move is to play g5, but as Anand himself showed with the black pieces, in fact b4 is a very good move there. Instead, Anand played rook g1, a very subtle move indeed. We'll see the point to this in a second. What happens if black pushes on with b4? Well, let me just show you very quickly. It seems as though black is storming first on the queen side, but actually it's not so clear. And we're about to see why this rook was played to g1. The pawn on b4 is attacked. Black defends, white attacks again, black defends, and now rook g4. The rook, knight and queen hit the pawn on b4, and that rook is beautifully placed on the 4th rank. This is the point to rook g1. The rook often gets involved in play via g4. Instead of b4, Topalov played knight b6. You can see that knight covers these very important squares d5, c4 and a4. Okay, good move, normal move. Knight a5 from Anand, threatening knight c6. Rook c8 came. Good move on the semi-open file, looking down at the knight and king. g5 from Anand, and now king b1. Now, it looks funny to give that knight a potential square on f4, but well, we'll see that actually there's a good point to playing g5. So the knight came into f4. This was actually played very recently by Anand himself with the black pieces in Vacanze just a few months ago, and he drew with black very easily against Peter Lecco. By the way, this pawn can't be taken because black has a very strong move here. Knight a4, hitting that knight and hitting the knight on c3 as well. So Anand played a3. And here Topalov deviated from this game Lecco against Anand. Instead of queen c7, as Anand played, it's rather confusing this, he played g6. No doubt he feared some improvement. Which shows how well both players know this position. It's move 16, and basically they're still in theory. h4 from Anand, very good move. Once this pawn is supported, it cramps that bishop. So this isn't an out-and-out kingside attack from white. Actually, it's quite positional. It's to do with cramping black's minor piece on e7. And now Anand chose to take on f4. Now you still can't take with the queen, but knight d5 was played. This has to be exchanged off. Now there's a little tactical trick from Topalov. He took on d5 because the queen hits the knight, and after queen takes knight. Well, let's take stock of this position. It's settled to some extent. Topalov has won a pawn, but white's queen stands very well in the centre of the board. So it's still rather double-edged. Anand's played rook g4, so he's going to win this pawn back. So again, we see this rook coming into play via g4. Rook c5 played from Topalov, good move. Now white's queen has a choice. Where would you go? One of these squares? Anand played the queen back to b3 instead. Turns out to be probably a good move, because what black needs to do here is improve this bishop. It's locked out of the game by this pawn on g5. It really wants to get to this long diagonal. Now it can do that if the rook moves, say to e8 or here, and then comes back, and once it's on g7, then black should be okay. But the problem is that white is going to take here, and then the rook and the queen hit f7, so there isn't time for that maneuver. That's why it was a good move to put the queen back on b3. So Topalov played a good move here. He locked out the queen. Of course, that can't be taken because there's a check on e1, winning bishop. So Anand just took on f4. Queen came back, hitting the rook, looking down the c file. Okay, it's good to get the queen back into play. Rook d4. Now, at this moment, no doubt about it, white has the more comfortable position. You can see white's heavy pieces all hitting that isolated pawn on d5. But Topalov, of course, understands things aren't so bad. He's not going to just play passively. He moved the queen out to attack the pawns on the king side. So yeah, if this pawn is taken, then h4 will drop. Anand played c3, good move, very solid, so never needs to worry about the c2 pawn. Rook d8 from Topalov, defending the pawn. Now, here's an interesting moment. Topalov could take on c2. Now, if he did, that's an admission that he's definitely worse here. He's just fighting for a draw. He could try to do this and try to liquidate pawns on the king side, but, well, this pawn is certainly going to drop very soon, and then, you know, who knows whether black has enough to hold a draw. But I can understand why Topalov didn't do that and wanted to maintain his active queen here. But after f4, I think we see the difference between the two minor pieces. Even if this bishop activates, in fact, Topalov played bishop d6 here, attacking this weak pawn here. This bishop, in fact, Anand moved it to g2, is potentially far more useful than this one. Once this bishop comes to d5, it looks at the king, whereas this bishop, well, it just doesn't get a sniff at white's king at all because these pawns block it out. Let's see what happens if, in this position, black takes on h4. Then bishop takes d5. This is a good illustration of how dangerous this bishop is compared to this one, hitting this sensitive square on f7. So there's already a threat to take. So okay, the bishop drops back. Queen e4. Well, what a beautifully centralized position white has. And even when this is defended, in fact, white crashes through here, and this is a forced checkmate. And queen e7, threatening queen g7, as well as queen takes rook. You can see that black's forces are very poorly coordinated, so it would have been a mistake for Topalov to take on h4. Instead, he played bishop takes f4 and bishop takes d5. Still problematic for black, because this bishop is much better than the one on f4. And also, again, black's pieces are rather split. Rooks work well when they're connected. These two are not connected. And the queen is a long way from the other black pieces as well. Okay, there's a threat to take on f7 again, so Topalov understandably played king g7. Queen e4, beautiful centralization from Anand. He didn't spend long over that move. And now let's see, there's another variation here. What happens if bishop e5? Well, then white can play rook f1, threatening something devastating here. Black defends, rook d3, queen h2, then this is really powerful, because if rook takes bishop, we can actually play queen takes rook, and the black king is in a box thanks to that pawn on g5, which does a fantastic job of controlling squares around the king, but also in many cases, as we've seen, blocking out that bishop. Okay, let's get back. So instead of bishop e5, Topalov played queen e3. So he's desperately wants the queens to be exchanged. Anand played very well indeed. Queen h1. I mean, it looks passive, but actually it's basically just clearing out of the way for the rooks to hit the queen and bishop. And they're very awkwardly placed here. Rook d7 from Topalov, defending f7, okay, understandable. And now the queen gets hammered. Now, maybe queen f2 is a stronger move, but it's still very difficult indeed. Topalov played queen e5, and after queen f3, he's already lost. Bishop is attacked. Topalov moved it. And now came the killer move from Anand. He played bishop e6. Very elegant indeed. If rook takes rook, queen f7 and mate on g8. If queen takes bishop, rook takes rook, white's the exchange up. And if rook e7, as was played in the game, excuse me, then rook e4 is a winning move. Here Topalov gave up the queen, but if the queen were to retreat, then white wins spectacularly with this. And now bishop takes pawn check, and rook here, and mate. So he gave up the queen, but this was hopeless. Of course, sometimes you can get a fortress with rook and bishop against queen, but here there are too many targets for white. This is a target. This is a target. Well, there are going to be mate threats on the back rank, and the bishop is also loose as well. It's too much for black to cope with. And throughout all this, white's king is completely safe thanks to these pawns on the dark squares cutting out that bishop, and of course there's a nice escape square for the king. So the rest was simple for Anand. Rook d8, so threatening queen a8 and a mate on the back rank. So therefore Topalov blocks it, but this is almost Tsubtsan actually. Black is running very short moves. King a2, that's a really cool move from Anand. Just tucking the king out away, making sure there are no surprise checks, and basically saying to Topalov, okay, you can do nothing. You brought the bishop back to block the queen out. Rook here, okay, now the bishop can't move. Black can only wait. And after rook a7, Topalov actually resigned here. He hardly has a move. Well, let's see if he just waits. King g7, and then rook takes a6, wins a pawn. And that's absolutely hopeless. A really beautiful win from Anand. Very smooth in all phases of the game. I think fantastic opening preparation. He really understood this position thoroughly. Normally Topalov does as well, but here, well, clearly he didn't understand it as well as Anand. And an elegant finish to match the game. I think this was vintage Anand. So watch out, Magnus, in November. After 3 rounds, Sergei Karyakin is still in the lead with 100%. He won today against Wang Hao in a beautiful technical game. Wish I had time to show that. So Karyakin has 3, Aronian and Anand with 2 points, and Carlsen has 1.5.